But first, to the thousands of our countrymen and women who tonight find themselves trapped in a third world country with substandard medical care during a pandemic and with no real idea of when they can return home. Being an Australian citizen should mean something. At the very least, it should mean that your country comes to your assistance at a time of crisis. But the Australian government has turned its back on around 9,000 citizens stranded in India. Not only have these people been abandoned, but they are banned from coming home. Why are we being so callous when there are other options? When coronavirus was raging in Wuhan early last year, the Australian government brought back plane loads of citizens and residents from the virus epicentre and had them quarantined on Christmas Island, away from the mainland. That was before we charged return travellers for the cost of quarantine. So the only cost to those who came home via Christmas Island was around $1,000 for flights. The Christmas Island solution was a highly successful intervention, though we did have the usual race-baiting blowhards on the ABC and elsewhere claiming those returning travellers were being treated unfairly because most were of Chinese heritage. Of course, it had nothing to do with race and everything to do with minimising risk. And there is no good reason why we can't employ similar measures to safely repatriate the thousands of Australians trapped in India. The capacity at Christmas Island is typically anywhere between 800 to 1,000, but it has held up to 3,000 people at once. We also have a number of remote detention facilities which could be repurposed if the government does not want to use city-based hotel quarantine. There are options. We're 15 months into this crisis and we still have tens of thousands of Australians stranded around the world, unable to enter their own country. Even the UN Human Rights Committee has slammed Australia for our failure to uphold the rights of citizens. Top human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson QC, representing 2 Australian men, filed a complaint with the UN Human Rights Committee, arguing the federal government had breached the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states that no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of the right to enter his or her own country. Earlier this month, the UN Human Rights Committee directed Australia to facilitate and ensure the return of stranded Australians. If Australian citizens are willing to undergo 2 weeks of quarantine and be billed for that expense, plus undergo COVID-19 tests before being released, then every effort should be made to facilitate their prompt return home. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's decision to halt all flights from India until at least May 15 will no doubt be popular with most voters. Throughout this pandemic, we've seen scaremongering and irrational fears cloud people's judgment and their sense of compassion. But we've seen also Australia bring back 250,000 overseas arrivals and put them through hotel quarantine. And only Victoria botched its program so badly that it led to hundreds of deaths and a 112-day lockdown. We know now that we can take more people safely by following New South Wales' gold standard hotel quarantine model, which is currently processing just over 3,000 arrivals per week. We're a civilised, prosperous country, and we should ensure that every Australian who wants to come back, no matter where they are in the world, is allowed to do so. Not because the UN has ordered it, but because it's the least a nation can do for those who hold the privilege of citizenship. Having our citizens die in a foreign country would amount to a shameful dereliction of duty.